now.
Awesome.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Holistic Human Optimization Show. I am your host, as always, Ronnie Landis, and I'm really excited. We have an amazing episode for all of you with one of the most amazing individuals, one of the most amazing human beings that I've ever encountered on my life journey. And that's saying a lot because I run in multiple circles of luminaries and leaders and change agents and catalysts, and really grateful for this is actually a good moment just to appreciate every single person that's been part of the journey, and particularly every single person that's been part of the podcast journey that we started almost 3 years ago. I just had a bright idea one day in Kauai, with the community of leaders that I'm aligned with, and I was going through my network and I realized, like, wow, I need to actually start a podcast because I actually have too many conversations that aren't happening right now and aren't getting into the world. And that was the impetus for me starting this. There was no like marketing strategy or any like business goal. It was just like literally, it was a moral imperative to bring all of these people together. And then it just grew and grew and grew from there. And it's taken on a life of its own. And so that has brought me and this amazing individual together in this moment, Miss Solara Sophia Rose. And I'm just going to share a little bit about her before we jump in. Solara Rose is an international channel and catalyst for high-frequency flow states, flow mastery, super abundance, and thriving divine success. She has been described as the modern Tesla of human energetics and living vortex of cosmic magic. With a background in intensive personal transformation, integrative science, philosophy, and psychology, she's who visionary leaders seek out for super accelerated quantum growth in all areas of life. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. So I'm thankful to be here. Where shall we begin?
That's the question. The first place I'd like to drop in with you is I would like to ask you, what are maybe 4 or 5 words that you would use to describe yourself?
Love. Harmony would be another word to complement that. Flourishing. Beauty. Light.
Beautiful. Same question. What are 4 or 5 words you would use to describe the work that you do?
Oh, yep. All of those things. Super abundance, flourishing, paradise, embodiment.
Okay. That's where we'll start then.
Okay.
Embodiment. That's a word that I have become very fond of over the last couple of years. That's been primarily the main focus of my own personal self-work is embodiment. And not just knowing something conceptually, but embodying it and embodying the principles as a moral code of conduct for how I operate in the world and how I treat myself, how I treat other people, and just living into further and further states of embodiment. So I would like to ask you, first of all, what does that mean to you? And, maybe share a little bit of your background and how you came to embody, who you are now and the work that you do.
A profound pull towards excellence. And by excellence, I mean the divinity that I know that I am, that we all are, and my capacity to live that through with every thought, feeling, action, word, and deed. So I love that you said living into, because that's precisely what it is. It's being connected to that stream of knowingness, of pure source, of home, of our divinity, of virtue, of valor, of kindness, of love, of honor, of all the things that make us the just amazing co-creators, divine creators, powerful creators that we are, and almost like siphoning those frequencies into the physical body and being so laser lucid attuned to them that I can be the emanation of them in all moments, no matter what I'm doing or where I am or what I'm interacting with. People, food, nature, the environment, just, yeah, living that all the way through every dimension of embodiment. And so it has taken a high level of super conscious self-awareness to recognize when I'm not in absolute alignment with that, and to be loving and compassionate and empathetic with myself when that's the case, and to just receive more. Receive more when I'm in those spaces, and to allow that frequency to fill me and penetrate me and open and expand me so that I can just exude it, because we all contain that at our core.
Beautiful. So talk to us a little bit about your journey. I have like a lot of things, as you know, we have a lot of things to dive deep into. So I'd love for everyone to get to know you a little bit more and a little bit about your backstory. And I'd like to start there. There's like so many questions already popping up in my head. So I'm going to refrain from all that and just start with, your journey. What has your journey been like? What has it looked like leading up to this point? What's your superhero origin story?
Man, this is such a profound and involved question, because my life has been catalyst after catalyst after catalyst. And I actually have recollection of choosing to come here, being a star being and being a spearhead with the galaxies and the star councils that I was involved in that particular iteration of self, and receiving the message that support was needed on Earth, and making the conscious choice to come here and help to raise planetary consciousness. So that would be the first part. So coming in, on the way down, I remember having the awareness that I can sustain anything temporarily. So I knew it wasn't going to be necessarily an easy a path that I was walking. And so for the first a little bit over a quarter of my lifetime, I would say that I experienced the depth of what most human beings experience as far as challenge and adversity goes, with physical health, with relationships. Grew up in a very abusive space, self-destructed for many years, was on anxiety and depression medications, tried to take my life, was in very unhealthy, toxic relationships. All of these things that I am so, so, so thankful that I experience now, because I was able to synthesize the gold from all of those experiences, to learn love, to learn compassion, to learn beyond forgiveness, empathy, to have a core understanding of what motivates and drives human behavior, and what it is to be connected to source and what it is to be disconnected from source within myself and in the world. So all of those experiences were necessary for me to understand energetics at the level that I do, to understand love and unity versus separation, fear versus exhilaration. Those are two of the core patterns that we as humans, I would say, toggle back and forth between in different moments in our life. And these are the core, I call them the core wounds of creation. When creation was first awakening to itself, and when it realized what it was fully, going through that journey of being fearful of its vastness, of its power, of its potential, to being exhilarated and excited by it. In any moment that we feel separate from our creation, from life, that energy can come in, that energy of fear. But when we know that we are all that is, and we're continuously connecting to another dimension of self, of source, we can really start to experience true intimacy and merge with ourselves, and ground into that frequency of love and unification in all moments. So, man, it's such a long, long, long journey, and beautiful and exquisite. And remembering beyond this lifetime, beyond this iteration, in this incarnation, being creation itself and awakening to myself in the void, and taking that infinite creation journey into self-actualized source and being that field of harmony, and then beyond that field of self-realization, self-actualization, and self-creation. So when that field that most of us experience when we have profound awakenings, things like Satori, or we catapult into higher dimensional frequencies and experience the power of that harmony, that light, that love, that interconnection, that field starts to dance at some point. Once it's really anchored into itself from that level of awareness, it moves into self-creation and movement. And that, I feel, is what we're actually accelerating into as a collective humanity right now. People starting to really know and remember who and what they are and ground that in. And then after the knowing, what happens? Pure mobility, pure freedom, pure dance, pure creation, thriving in the flow of superabundance is what I like to call it. But yeah.
So there's so many things that you said that I think could deserve their own kind of bullet point in terms of talking points, and like how to further dive into. I guess what's coming up for me is it comes back to the embodiment principle that we started with, right? So everything that you shared and that you so beautifully and perfectly actually embody all of those things. That's why I'm so in admiration and respect of you. Not just your brilliance in your teaching, but also who you are. It comes through you like a channel. So I guess that makes sense, right? And it's an emanation. It's a rare thing. So I'd like to talk about. There's a couple things that are coming to me. One of them is just like, yeah, it's the embodiment of it. But I guess where I'm going with that is, you mentioned awakenings, right? And a lot of times what I've found both in my journey and with a lot of people is that we can get addicted to peak states of experience. Right? The mild examples is like the coffee in the morning, right? To get up and go. And then you associate the energy with the coffee, then it becomes a pattern, right? And so it's like, I do this to get energy, or, whatever, alcohol, or whatever people are doing to stimulate themselves to a greater state of feeling, a peak experience that obviously has a drop-off effect in most cases. So what I want to ask you, what's your perspective around sustaining the peak states? Like, even if somebody's doing a medicine journey or they have a Satori experience, many of us, most of us have had those experiences of breakthroughs, but oftentimes they stay that. And so I want to know, how do you feel about not just the awakening, because that's great, that's fun, but the actual stabilization of those peak states, so it's not a high and a low. It's like, it's the quantum leap principle, right? The incremental momentum creates a spontaneous quantum leap, and then and it's constantly happening. It's like straight line, so to speak, boom, right? Not straight line, but just on a diagram perspective. So anyways, you get what I'm saying.
Yes. Well, the very first thing that wants to come through, so I'm just going to honor it, is to live purposefully with intent from the heart. So all of our power, and living from the heart really is the peak experience, and that is sustainable. It's our natural state. It's where true ecstasy starts to flower. And so there's an innocent, there's a purity to that space. And it's certainly a cultivation, because anytime we have an awakening like that and we kind of, I'll say, arise or expand into these higher dimensional octaves of vibration and what is possible for us, there can be a kind of a snapping back effect. So ritual is one very powerful way to ground and anchor that in. Purity on all levels has been really important for me in my life, relationships, health. Finding life balance is essential. So there's 5 main areas. I look at health, energetics and spirituality, relationships, business, finance, service, creative expression. And each day, finding what our balance is between all of those dimensions and giving it our best, having fun every single day to develop and cultivate those areas of our life. And then we're filled with life. So it really becomes about those peak experiences. I mean, you feel fully alive. That's the essence of it. I'm fully alive in this moment. I'm supercharged. I'm filled with source energy. I'm filled with who and what I truly am, cosmic power. So what can we do to help ourselves feel more alive? And can we live into that? And that's a space of high mobility. And so one of the things that we can do is start to contract when that much energy and that much, that many miracles, that many blessings, that much love starts to just pour into us, because it's like, wow, can I really receive all of this? Can I really have all of this? Is this real? And it starts to unearth a lot of our patterns and things like this. So opening and allowing, creating spaces for life balance, taking time for self to nourish and cultivate our vision, our channel, and to just let that love in, and to be with what that feels like, to breathe it in, to allow it to inhabit us, and to continue moving forward into more and more life. While it is our greatest desire to experience that, it's simultaneously the thing that we fear the most, because when it starts to come, that's where we can experience contraction. So staying open to let all of that in. So it's such a dynamic thing, and it's so contingent upon the individual. So living from the heart, dynamic life balance that promotes health and purity in life and flourishing and thrival on all levels. Staying open to life, presenting us with all that we truly desire to experience, and flowing with it, moving with it, trusting it fully. And then we can at least start to shorten the distance between valleys. And one of the ways, it can all be, even the valley can be a peak in my experience. Totally. It depends on how we perceive it. If we can move into the valleys and just savor them and find harmony within them, then it can be experienced as a peak also.
Absolutely. I mean, my experience has been that through the expansion process of my own capacity to hold and to actually experience, those upper limit feelings that you mentioned, and to really be within, to really expand my capacity to feel joy and appreciation and gratitude and love and those things, I've noticed that when my head bumps up against the proverbial ceiling of the upper limit, if I just stay with it, the upper limit will dissolve, and there'll be another octave. So there'll be another expansion. There'll be an expansion of my own capacity to be a greater version of myself. And then I noticed, like, that drop-off effect, like the boomerang or rubber band effect, it happens. So like when I fall from grace, so to speak, I fall from my optimum self, I don't fall as hard or as low as I did before, because there's some kind of built-in floor plan built into the architecture of my own evolution. So I don't know, like it's an interesting thing, as if there's a perfectly designed mechanism to hold me, or I hold me, however you want to kind of, whatever it is, whatever's built into the blueprint of evolution and growth. I find that to be an interesting thing, because if we don't, so stabilization, I guess, is what I'm coming to, right? When we stabilize it, but if we're just kind of bouncing through peak experiences, and then hopping from the next thing, the next festival, the next medicine journey, the next relationship, the next diet ideology, whatever the thing is, and we don't really stabilize, and we don't develop our own core sense of values, meaning we know who we are, we know what drives us, we know what our priorities are, so we're stable in who we are and what we stand for. Then it's just like, we just kind of hop around. So anyways, I thought that's kind of what came up for me. And also, I want to also just kind of mention the unearthing principle, because it really goes hand in hand. I love that term. I didn't really think of it that way. The unearthing of our prior patterns.
Oh, this is so good. There's so much juice in here, in nectar. So let's see where the energy wants to go first. So stabilization, that's the value of rituals and life balance, dynamic life balance. You've got to stay with it, and you've got to cultivate those spaces to nourish and honor what we're experiencing, so that it can stabilize and become a new normal, in which case higher states are accessible, more expanded states. And because we're an infinite creator, if you were to think of yourself as a holographic avatar representation of energy and consciousness, almost like a disco ball. That expansion is constant. So there's always going to be a next and a next, and you're always going to be receiving and experiencing and emanating and living into more and more of who and what you are. So that's an ongoing process. And as you're explaining about the patterns, I was just being brought to the image of sacred geometry and seeing that fractal pattern and how it's infinitely in and infinitely out. And you mentioned this the evening with Ken Wilber, the way he describes it, and I think he alludes to something different.
I was just have to say, I was in my mind right as you said that. I was just thinking of Ken Wilber.
Mm-hmm. The idea of including and transcending, and I don't know what ideology he connects that to, although like his is probably more practical and tangible, that I'm about to go into the geometric realms, is that pattern, because and we are made up of that pattern, is constantly evolving and expanding into a more dynamic and complex version of itself. It is a fusion of light, sound, frequency, and vibration, and that, you know, imagining that we begin as a seed of life, say we come in as a seed and we're expanding into the flower and beyond and beyond and beyond. Every time that pattern takes a new shape, there's a bit of a shaking up that happens so that it can rearrange and stabilize itself at a new dimensional octave of consciousness, of light, of energy, of power. And we always, as we go through that evolution, we contain all the previous patterns. So that's information, that's knowledge, that's wisdom, that's how creation and energy behaves at certain levels of consciousness. And, you know, you can see this when you're looking at the quantum universe versus the Newtonian universe. They're both still here. And some people are living in a completely Newtonian universe, and those are the rules that they play by. Some people are living in quantum, and some people have gone into the realm of supernatural reality creation, in which case you are the prime, you know, molder, shaper, designer of your reality, which you can transcend and even bend and influence those natural laws from the embodiment of the I Am presence. But all of these different octaves and dimensions of consciousness contain knowledge, intelligence, wisdom, self-gnosis, remembrance. And once we acclimate to them and we really absorb it and we receive it fully and we anchor that in, then there's the next expansion, and that continues and continues. So we include and then we transcend. So now that we've learned all the playing rules at this level, we include it, but we transcend it. And now what's next? So we're aware of it. We can access that information, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're playing by those rules anymore.
Right. And this is a really interesting thing. The practicality of it is that in any endeavor, especially growing up as an athlete, it's like so obvious that, you know, if you want to do high level things, whatever, being in a sport or a martial artist, if I want to learn to backflip, I better learn how to do other things first, right? Or I'm just going to follow in my head. I better learn the basics before I try to fly. But the cool thing is once you master the basics, you can break the rules. Or in other words, you have to know the rules in order to break them. You can't just think that you got it all figured out and you can just go into the reality creation matrix, whatever, or any practical thing that you're trying to master and you're just going to be a superstar, right? Like you're just going to go out there because you believe that you can. You actually have to do the fundamental physical patterns or you have to master the basics of that thing. But once you do, then you have the creative freedom to do, you know, move it, direct it any which way you do and create something new out of it. But there's this principle that I really appreciate about not skipping over steps. And this is an interesting thing too, because like I know your perspective on quantum leaping, and before we got on here, you were talking about like I'm really into like skipping levels. So it's an interesting paradox, which I think both are valid. But I also want to say, for you, what I believe is probably true is that you've mastered the basics, so you can actually quantum leap and hopscotch around different experiences. But you haven't bypassed or skipped necessary steps of development.
Yeah, that's for certain. Yeah, I definitely have the basics mastered, for sure. You know, life taught me in some really beautiful, pleasant ways and some really deeply challenging ways. And I had to go deep in within myself. And, those skip a level technologies were revealed to me by doing that inner work. So it was almost, this is accessible to all of us. And I imagine if you come in with, arms wide open, heart wide open, invincibility, total recollection and remembrance, you can just live and operate from that space. And I would say that would be the exception to what we're talking about, because it is the truest nature of all of us. But yeah, I certainly went through a journey of discovering and earning my capacity to be able to do a lot of the things that I'm able to do, none of which I take for granted, and all of which is deeply rooted in appreciation, because there's an immense responsibility that comes with having that power and being able to truly bend, playing with forces of nature. It's not, it's not just something that,
it's not a play toy.
It's not a play toy at all. And there's a deep care and devotion and a meticulousness and a fine art that comes with moving those energies and doing so with purpose and intent. And I don't even believe that those technologies are revealed to us unless we've done a certain amount of deep work. And if they were, we wouldn't really know how to utilize them, in which case it could, you would learn by trial and error in that case. It could be not safe. It could be very unsafe.
Yeah. I think, this is segueing in an interesting direction that I wanted to go with you anyways, because one of the things that's coming up for me around the whole skip a level perspective is that depending on the development of one's soul, I would say, and the recollection of the experiences in lessons and life experiences throughout millennia, depending on the signature of one's soul, some of us, all of us, have innate qualities or innate characteristics, innate skills, and we call that our genius, right? So where does genius come from? I think that it's very likely from a past life perspective that they're developed qualities that have matured, so they come with us in certain sense. Like we have an inclination as a young child. For me at 4 years old, it was martial arts. The first conscious memory I have as a human being is Bruce Lee. I don't remember anything before that. I think there was like some kind of trauma or something that happened, but I don't remember any of that. I just remember Enter the Dragon being on TV, Bruce Lee's last famous movie, and it imprinted this iconography onto my consciousness about a real life superhero. And that stayed with me, and that actually was an aspiration that I didn't even know I had. It just kind of like over the years, it was my inclination to go towards it, and then it became part of my mastery and my life path. So I want to open up with that around this conversation about awakening and actualizing our genius. That's a huge hallmark of your work and what you talk about. And so like what is genius? Where does it come from? How do we access it and actualize it?
Exquisite. Thank you. So genius is what we all are. It is that field of light, intelligence, super abundance, creative, vitalized, activated life force energy and intelligence, higher consciousness. Genius is, everything that we see in nature is a product of genius. We all contain genius, and we're connected into the same collective genius. The way that it channels through each of us, and this is the brilliance of it, is it's so dynamic and exotic and unique, and that's what makes us the beautiful, magnificent divine creators that we are, is that we each express that genius in a different way. We access it by allowing it. It is not something that can be in any way manipulated, controlled, contrived. It's to go and find your genius. It's more about opening to it and allowing it to channel through. Like when I do talks of any kind, I never prepare. I have no idea what's going to happen before I go on, and I prefer it that way, because then that way, whatever energy wants to move through me can. And I haven't had an opportunity to grab a hold of anything with my intellectual mind. And so it's something that we open to and allow. And I think that is, the way that I have experienced the birthing, the amplification, the emanation of that energy, that light, that power, that creative intelligence, is to do things that help us to connect with our soul, So moving beyond the space and place of the mind and surrendering into what wants to come through. Body listening to our body. Dance is a great way to just get into the felt sensation. Anything to do with music. EDM is something that I love, that supports me opening more and more into that space to feel ourselves, to be in our body, to be super connected to our sexuality. That's so primary. And one of the main access points to genius is through our sexual connection to our body, to our divinity, to the earth, and allowing that energy to flow through. That is the creative portal of that intelligence. Yeah. So we allow it. It's creative. It's creative in nature. Our potential is creative in nature, and that'll express through all different dimensions of our embodiment: our heart, our soul, our sexuality, our mind. It'll come through in all the different ways, but it's how it chooses to express in the moment. So being open and available to it.
So one of my favorite quotes on genius, my favorite quote on genius by far, is by a man named Walter Russell. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the great mystics of the last 100 years of the world, really. And he wrote a series of incredible books, and I got really turned on to him through a few mutual friends and mentors that were really into his work. And he wrote this book called Genius Inherent Within. It's this small little book. And when you open up the book, the first quote is that mediocrity is self-inflicted, genius is self-bestowed. And I open up a lot of my lectures with that exact quote, because the fundamental principle and intention for the work I do is to help people access their genius. So through nutrition and health and optimizing the human vessel, which I want to talk to you a little bit more about as we go along. But through doing that, accessing our innate intrinsic genius. And I find that quote is so deep and so rich, because it brings up two kind of diametrically opposite paths, which I think people get really stuck on, which is like the self-destructive patterns and the self-success patterns. So like self-bestowed genius or genius is our inherent success patterns, and mediocrity is our I don't know if you say inherent, I think programmed or conditioned self-destructive patterns. And so if we're living the status quo, we're living by the adoption of other people's values, we don't know who we are, we haven't owned who we are in our own greatness, then somehow we perpetuate self-destructive and self-sabotage patterns. And the more we go down that corridor, it's like we start to hop on the train going towards the culture of death. And then, but if we tilt that and pivot and we own all that we are and everything that you're talking about, and we start to step into our creative genius, then we start to hop on the train going towards the culture of life. Mm-hmm. And life begets life, right? Yeah. And so that whole thing is pretty fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love how clear it is to you that there are primarily these two pathways that we can choose, life or death, and that we don't have to oscillate between these cycles of death and rebirth and all of that. We can end that, karmic loops, and we can just choose life. We can choose excellence, but it requires choice on our behalf to wake up every single day and to live into our excellence in all facets and dimensions of our life, and to have a good time doing it, to have fun, to make it a creative, adventurous, enlivening, exhilarating experience. What can I create next? So this is getting into value, and you and I have discussed this, is one of the ways to access the free energy of life is to move beyond ourselves and to think about all the ways that we can add life and value and abundance to others at our most optimal capacity. And so as we are living into our own excellence, we discover more and more of what that is. Our capacity expands. We can give more, therefore creating more abundance, receiving more abundance. And you're just living in this. You're living fully as the sum embodiment of who you are, as source, as genius, as that creative intelligence. And so it's accessing more and more of our true power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is an incredible kind of unpacking of the concept of genius, because the common person, I guess, associates genius as like this one-dimensional IQ type of standardized, memorization, repeat, rinse and repeat thing that we did in compulsory industrial education. And which, by the way, I find it interesting that that form of education that we all grew up with, only 8% of the population statistically learns that way. The majority of the population learns, whether it's auditory or kinesiologically, through the body, or visually, or through immersion, which I think ultimately, and that's what we're really talking, that's another word to describe a lot of what we're talking about, is immersing ourselves in the practice, immersing ourselves in the experience. Yeah.
That's another word for cultivation too, and it's so much better, I think, because it's beyond cultivation even. It is a total absorption and immersion.
Engagement.
Union. Yeah.
So okay, that's an interesting one. So I just want to touch on this a little bit more before we pivot. So I think there's an aversion to engaging with our genius. And we can say it's conditioning, programming. Yeah, okay, great. And then it's fear, and then this whole thing, right? Yeah, okay, got it. And something is built into the human psyche that seeks to abort its own evolution. It's almost like an adversarial force. And from an archetypal and mythological level, it gets pretty interesting. The inner battle, or the inner conflict, and the inner resolution. So the inner hero's journey is an interesting kind of theme there. But however you want to kind of color it, what I'm trying to just articulate is my experience in working with so many people. There's this aversion to being our best self. And I want to get your take on that. And then, because it doesn't have to be that way. Right. And this is the whole thing. Like, we can choose which track and which directive for our life that we're going to move towards without this push and pull, take one step forward, two steps back kind of thing that most people do. Yeah.
Oh man, there's a lot there. So I'm just going to feel into the energetics of that, and just going to start streaming what comes through. Fear of separation, fear of rejection, fear of being perceived as eccentric, wild, exotic, crazy, not fitting into the culture. All the things that come up when we truly live into our genius, and it's not necessarily, it's not the status quo in a lot of cases. And I feel very fortunate and blessed, as I think we all do, that we're living in a time such as now where living into our genius and expressing it is so much more celebrated. And so one of the things that people really need is affirmation to really move into that space. And so we either give that to ourselves, or we receive it from our loved ones, or we're connecting powerfully into source to really ground into our power and to continue moving into it, and expressing it in the world fearlessly, devoutly. It's so liberating to do so. And so having encouragement and support, whether it's coming from within or without, and a lot of the fear is our power. It really is. It's our power, our vastness, our capacity. What does that mean? What will it mean for this to fully come to fruition, for me to live into the vision that I'm seeing and experiencing? What is that? Who am I in that reality? What does that look like? Can I hold that much power? So while there's an inherent desire and a pull towards it, the gravitational constant of life is always pulling us all in that direction. There is simultaneously our biggest fear until we move through it, until we just open and move through it, in which case invincibility is accessible to us.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is amazing. I've harped on this in so many different ways about this phenomenon that I perceive, and it's an invisible phenomenon. So it requires faith, because faith is the belief in that which is unseen but deeply felt, and the obedience to be faithful, which is just a principle and just a topic in of itself that is so pertinent. So I mean, it's the core. It's everything, right? So this idea of invincibility, I talk about invincible health. developing an invincible immune system where you are impenetrable against getting sick under any situation, no matter what it is. That's been my experience for almost 10 years. Mm-hmm. And but I want to talk about it from kind of where I think what's coming through you, which is this idea when we're on our path. This is my idea. When we're on our path and we're fully aligned with it, not just aligned with it energetically, but we are faithful to it. We are living into it. It almost seems like there is this protective field, like, you know, people have experience. I've had this experience where I believe in angels or whatever that is, whatever we call that. It's definitely real. I've gotten bailed out of some situations in my life that I did not get myself out of. So I think that there, you know, this principle that we are always being guided. There's a universal GPS system that's always trying to reroute us. Even if we skip a step, it's like, oh, go right here. Oh, you missed it. Okay, route around. It's always trying to reroute us back on track. And if we can get on track and really live into it, the higher the stakes, the higher the responsibility, but then the higher the protection at the same time.
Yeah, that's exquisite and profound. It's living in alignment is what it is, from moment to moment to moment, to staying open to our cosmic power and allowing it to move in us and through us, and to stay connected to that stream and to channel it, to be continuously channeling it. And as it's the ultimate protection, right? We're embodying the pure quintessence, the quintessential energy and nature of who and what we are. And that energy unto itself is invincible, you know. Looking at flow states, when they talk about that being a cause for some spontaneous healings, is entering into a flow state. That's that energy moving through our body. That the truth and essence of who we are is all loving, all knowing, all protective, all supplying, all of that. So that's all we really need to do is connect into that, stay connected into it, and trust it. And not staying open and flourishing into that flow constantly, which does require faith, which does require extreme trust and knowing and openness, being willing to stay open and expanded into that, to see and perceive only from the highest potential timeline, and to be conscious of when that's not there. And those are opportunities to hone our channel and go, okay, I'm aware that that's there now. Let's come back in. And that refinement is always happening. And then eventually we're just living in that stream, but we are that stream. And that is, reality creation right there at its max, at its peak, is being in the flow of that and enacting it.
All right, so now we got to talk about the science of synchronicity. So one of the things I picked up from one of the talks that I was listening to you give was architecting miracles in synchronicity, that being in accord, harmony, or agreement with. That being a synchronicity, being in accord, harmony, or agreement with. So, we got synchronicity, serendipity. This is such a fantastic topic, such a phenomenon that I've been fascinated with for as long as I was aware that such a thing existed. So let's dive into that.
Let's do it. I'm just getting a visual right now of the Taurus vortex. Call it the cosmic vortex, the vortex of creation that we all have access to, but it's being in the total sum embodiment of who and what we are, which means that in any given moment we are experiencing super symmetrical, cohesive alignment to that which we truly are, and we're embodying it throughout all dimensional facets of our being. We're embodying it and allowing it and exuding it. So it's this space of harmonic resonance with all that is, with the sovereign self and the quantum self. So then we're living in the embodiment of the one body of the quantum self, and that energy is just pouring and streaming through us, and it's harmony. So synchronicity means to be in agreement or accord with, and the highest accord there is accord with that higher intelligence, that genius source consciousness, which is pure abundance, prosperity, love, flourishing. It's pure positive photonic energy. So it's pure positive light energy.
I'm going to digress. We're coming right back to this. So you mentioned the word symmetry. Immediately what popped in my head was the experiments by Dr. Masaru Emoto, the water experiments, which is, there's a lot of fascinating distinctions within that a lot of people may not realize. But I was thinking about the experiments that they did when they used sound vibrations, and they used, just intention and energy. So they would take, the experiments, right? So they would just take, they would examine the water molecules or the rice that they basically just, they took a piece of tape or whatever and then said, I love you. Then one was just left alone. It was indifferent. And then one was, I hate you or something, just intense negative energy. And then they examined the water molecules and the crystalline arrangements, and symmetry is exactly the word that came to me. You could see the disassociate, or the dissonance of symmetry in the negative imbued water versus the positive pure love was just perfect crystalline snowflakes. Mm-hmm. And then you think okay, the human body is mostly made of water, right? And our cells are just water bags. There's 10 layers of water within each cell. And there's a lot I could just go deeper into that, but just on that basic principle, just pausing on that real quick. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm curious, what your thoughts are on that. I'm coming right back around to our synchronicity talk.
Mm-hmm. So those are the frequencies that are in resonance with truth, the highest intelligence, that which flourishes and creates and expands life. And that's why there was a super symmetry to it, or a symmetrical pattern. The water of our body, we are 80 to 90% water. So programming ourselves with that truth. And if we feel like we're out of alignment, it's either originating from our thoughts, which then seep into our emotional body and become the water of our body. So repatterning and reprogramming the water of our body on a daily basis is also a really beautiful thing that we can do, keeping our emotional waters pure and just in resonance with.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Because the element of water is emotion, or the element of emotion is water. Mm-hmm. So we want it. So Bruce Lee said the great quote, non-running water grows stale. So keep on flowing.
Yes. Keep the waters flowing. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's the power of that mobility also, and purity, so that the energy can flow through us. And you'll notice during different stages of your journey and your awakening that there's a calibration to having a capacity to hold this much power, to hold as much power as accessible to us. And that happens at the physical level. So staying really pure and available for that energy to flow is also something really important to tune into. And that gets down, just even micro thoughts. So it starts to come up for me, because the water is the most easily programmable substance on earth and in our body, and our thought just, you can feel wait a second, something's not totally in, we got to dial it in, and just becoming aware of what that is, so that our emotional body stays pure, and only allowing into our world and our environment that which can help to nourish and grow and sustain and expand that, which also sets a planetary standard for the consciousness that we will allow.
Mm-hmm. I'm such a huge living spring water advocate. My experience with that has been the most profound thing for my health, my well-being, and my consciousness that I've ever experienced. Literally the age of Aquarius, carrying the water on your back, literally carrying jugs of water through a hill, doing a mile hike, and going to the spring, the source, the womb of where that water is coming from, that's never ever been exposed to the outer atmosphere ever. It's been incubating in an underground aquifer for potentially hundreds of years, filtered by the geology of the earth, which is what all filters, by the way, in your housing system are based on. They're based on earth elements. So I just like to go straight to the source. And one of the interesting things that I've tuned into is that there is a consciousness to the water, because it's incubating within the earth. And we know that water, as you said, is a programmable substance. And so if you're drinking water out of a municipal system, even if it's filtered, I talk to people about the homeopathic effect of all the chemicals, all the 77,000 identifiable chemicals that have been spewed into our environment over the last 70 or 100 years. And all that's being recycled into the water. So all that kind of distorted runoff from people biologically, literally, is being homeopathically, I don't know any filter that can homeopathically disinfect that. Maybe distilled water, maybe, I don't know. But anyways, so where I'm leading to at this point is that's just fun to talk about. That's
it feels good. I feel the water, the spring water.
Yeah. And what I've noticed in my journey is that the higher up the octave that I go, the more transformation that I do, the less food that I need. And the more water that I'm drinking. I'm so grateful that was my access point through Living Foods, which is water-rich food, and through Living Spring Water. That's like the greatest. I'm so happy that's what called me. It wasn't like, paleo diet or something like that. I'm so happy this was my access point. Yes, that's an interesting thing, just about the connection between health, nutrition, our physical empowerment, consciousness, water, liquids, the upgraded kind of form of where our dietary evolution is going as human beings. We don't actually require as much caloric substance because we're actually becoming a free energy generating device. What do you think about that?
Oh my God, it's so good, and it's absolutely accurate. It's where we're headed, because that light then becomes our fuel,
right?
And that's what we're eating off of, we're feeding off of, we're generating. Yeah, like you said, being pure generators, and that's the nectar, that's the juice of life, that's the inspiration. It gives us all the energy and power that we could possibly want, need, and desire to go out and create and live and thrive. And it's what most of us are seeking through many different types of avenues. So the more we have access to those higher dimensional octaves, the less food we do need, because we're actually transforming from carbon-based beings into crystalline, diamond structured beings, in which case light, so sunlight, water, air, being primary sources of nourishment, less and less food, because you really just don't, there's not really a desire that's there for it anymore. So not to freak anyone out here, and I'm a total foodie, I love food and I still enjoy food, but there's not, it's natural. It feels natural. It feels wonderful and amazing in the body. It's a natural progression, evolution of where we're all headed, inevitably.
Right. And it's becoming more about the micronutrients. It's becoming more about, like, obviously everyone has their own different metabolisms and they're at their own point of physiological development. So it's not to say one's right or the other. It's a learning game. Like, we have to go through all the stages. But what I find is the natural progression is really about the micronutrients, the minerals in particular, because those are signatures of light. Those are frequencies of light in of themselves. And those are the activators with the enzymes that actually catalyze all the inherent DNA functions. But then there's another interesting thing, which is the subtle energies. So I oftentimes, when I have the time to go deeper into this in lectures, I'll talk about biospherical nutrition, which is really more of an elemental supplementation program, which is like the sun, getting the photons absorbing into your skin, getting into like sun gazing, starting to move into that, getting grounded on the electrical circuitry of earth, getting grounded, getting barefoot on the earth. Spring water, and then your atmosphere, air, getting like real air, like electrically charged air, right? So like that's amazing in of itself, because one of the things I've found, I'm going on a few little tangentials here, so one of the things I've found is that the big problem with the diets is that they're constructed and theorized by people that live in cities disconnected from nature, and they're trying to tell you what the natural eating patterns of indigenous people were once upon a time, that has very little relevance to the toxicological and the quote unquote civilized world that we live in. Which is why there's so much yo-yo and so much disconnection from like what's the right actual eating pattern, which is a bit of a long thing. But ultimately, what I've found is that the eating patterns or nutritional philosophies that tend to work long term and create real transformative results are the ones that lead us back to nature. So that's why raw living foods, in my opinion, like out of everything I've ever seen in my life, every transformational thing, seminar, supplement, book, audio book, coaching program, whatever, I have never seen in my life as many consistent cases of people's lives being completely revolutionized as getting into living food. That's the, and so that is why is that? Well, there's information, there's intuitive messages, if you will. There's messages in that food because it's living, and then it gets imparted to us. So we become a little bit natural, then we become a little bit more curious, and it starts to lead us. And eventually you find yourself growing cacao on a 44-acre permaculture farm in Hawaii.
Which is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I mean, I remember doing a week-long fast with nothing but cacao and living water, and just being so activated, so activated. So I'm with you 1,000% on the raw living foods. And I think that tuning into their own nature and their own self to find what that next step is for them, or
right.
So listening to ourselves above all else is one of that would be my highest guidance, is to plug into what we truly and authentically need that is connected directly to the nutrients of the earth.
Mm-hmm. I think there's an interesting thing where I started, I don't know if I coined this, it just came to me, which is the soul is in the soil. So like, for example, one of the initiatives that I want to spearhead or at least participate in is getting autistic children and their parents growing medicinal plants and fruit trees. Because we need to plant some trees. That's like one of my pet peeves when people in the entrepreneur world are like, just cracked another 100,000, bought this like $400,000 car. And my whole thing's like, man, if you can afford a $400,000 car, you can afford to plant some damn trees. That's my whole gripe and pet peeve with that. But what do? You have to be the solution, right? So one of the things that I want to do as an initiative and contribution, using any form of success that I may be able to create monetarily, is reinvest that into efforts to get particularly autistic children of all kinds, but I find that's becoming an epidemic in of itself. And there is a deep connection and separation between us and nature. And I feel like there's such a profound healing effect, not just for the children, not just for their parents, that's the key combination, is the parents and the children doing it, but then also for the earth itself. I think it works as a feedback for one another.
Oh yeah, Gaia loves it when we charge her up. Because I do the planetary activations daily, and I can just feel how thankful she is when I send light into her. And I mean, we are nature, we are earth, we are cosmic star particle energy. That is what we are made up of. And so it just makes sense to harmonize with those elements and to nourish ourselves through them and to give back into them and to, harmonize with nature in that way. It's really, man, I remember when I first was making that shift off of medications and all of that, I didn't realize how much I couldn't feel myself, my essence. I didn't know that I was missing myself that whole time. My soul wasn't even present in my body fully. And I came off of that, went directly to starting to eat in alignment and harmony with nature. And it was like, wow, here I am. Hello. And I was so clear and I felt so alive and so good. I'm like, and this is simple. It's so simple because it's natural and it's inherent for us to, harmonize with nature in that way. And to, yes, give back into her because it's a co-creation. She's a living entity and being just as much as we are, and she needs our nourishment and honor and love and support.
Right. This is crazy. I just for the first time made a connection between my aversion or lack of desire to drink filtered water. There's like the obvious stuff, but then I just realized instinctually there's something instinctual about that for me. I mentioned that water filters are basically like you have carbon, you have charcoal, you have clay compounds. Those are the filtering mechanisms for the water, right? Those are the same the same compounds in nature that naturally filters the water. Well, one of the things that I thought about with that is that there's when I go get my own spring water, I'm returning to the mother. I'm visiting my mother, right? You know, your mother's calling you like, hey, when are you going to come home? I get that all the time. When are you going to come home? And it's that feeling. It's a feeling of coming home and visiting the cosmic mother, the hydrological mother that sustains all life. It's like there's this direct felt connection, and I can feel when I'm going through that journey, wherever I'm going to the spring, automatically I'm plugged into my extrasensory state of appreciation. Like I'm just like, oh yes, oh my God, where was I all this time? Thank you. And then when I go and I get the water, it's not as if I'm there's how many people out there are doing it? You know, one of the arguments people be like, well, if everyone got spring water, then there'd be none. It's like, no, dummy. It's an infinite source. It's coming out whether you're going to it or not. So like when I'm going there, I'm giving and I'm receiving. Like there is no take. I'm actually receiving the gift of that. And I'm also giving the gift of my presence in my awareness that I even know it exists.
That's exquisite. Yeah. Anytime I've gone to any kind of a spring, whether it is to bathe and luxuriate and the purity and freshness of the water, just instant connection to source, to appreciation, just this profound force field of peace and harmony and clarity, and feeling so at ease and filled with the nourishment of that water. Water is so important, man. I mean, anyone who goes and spends a day in nature anywhere, even if it's, water, yes, anywhere in nature to rebalance and harmonize and align, will just help us get back connected back in. I think that experiencing a significant time every day in nature is pivotal for optimal health and well-being on all levels, mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, relationally.
Totally. Yes. I think one of the biggest issues with psychological mental health issues is that people are, you know, you could say so many different things, but it's really about a society. You know, you're living in this, you know, there's Wi-Fi fields and everything like that. But from the psychological level, I think the city concrete environment that at its best attempt is mimicking nature or transplanting trees from somewhere and planting it on a sidewalk. So you have some kind of like holographic sense of nature, and you feel like, okay, that makes sense. Like there's some kind of ancestral kind of thing. It's like, okay, you need that there. Like in environments that are void of nature, void of any kind of semblance of nature, are most the rundown environments where people are degrading mentally, emotionally, physically. That's where the most crime is, the most poverty is. In the areas that are closer and closer, getting closer and closer to nature, you notice in affluent areas, they're covered. I notice here in LA, when I'm driving around Beverly Hills versus downtown LA, it's like in Beverly Hills, it's like, it's actually nice to drive around because it's actually surrounded by nature and trees and parks. It's like, whoa, I actually like the vibe here. It's a little bit cleaner. You know, people are crazy, but they're a lot less crazy than they are over there. And that must be a pretty interesting correlation.
Well, it balances us, our biomorphic fields, our hologenetic fields, all of that. And if we don't have it, we can, for me, it's like overstimulation of the wrong kind. If I have too much interference of any kind, even if it's just electronics, you know, trying not to do as much time on those, because that will create it's almost like a stop in the energy. My being, it just flat out starts to repel it and reject it. Like, nope, you can't come here. It's almost like a solid wall gets created where I have to be in nature, surrounded by nature, to even hear and think and feel clearly.
Right. Which is why I love cold bodies of water. I'm on people about this, just the cold showers. I'm telling you guys, this is your pattern interrupt. This is your immediate drop into the clearest thinking you've ever done in your life. Anytime you're stressed, you're breaking down, you're going through it, cold water, the immersion.
Yes.
Where were you? So let me ask you, what does your lifestyle self-care practices look like?
Oh man, there's so much. So wake up every single morning and meditate, do an appreciation, just what's natural to me to feel thankful and grateful for, connecting into source, praying, doing an energy activation until that feels fully complete. And then I actually literally physically clean my space and my environment every day. And I reset the sound with chimes. Sometimes I'll use Palo Santo in sage and just attune the frequency for my space. Then I do yoga, and I'll do some form of dancing. You know, typically more tribal in nature. I do vocal exercises and practices to keep my vagal nerve toned, activated.
Yes.
So everything that I can do to activate all the different dimensions of my body creatively and expressively, so that I can feel my power, resonate my power, express my power, and attune my instrument, right? All the different chakra points in my physical and non-physical body, which are ultimately infinite, but the core ones. I go for a run every single day.
Wow.
As much time in nature as I possibly can. Visioning every day, working in my business every day. And the visioning comes before I work in my business, so I can take that eagle eyes view and see everything. Synthesize it, and then and I activate flow states too. So this is a profound exercise for anyone I command it that I want to experience it, and I always line up with it. So I just get really laser lucid, clear, and precise, and say, this is exactly what I want to experience tonight. So I'm going to take that eagle eyes view, get my vision, see what all needs to be synthesized, created, brought into form, and then I activate that pure flow state. So then it's just a matter of opening and allowing that to come through, which, calls and things like this with clients every day. Just taking excellent care of every dimension of my life. Cold shower every single day. At the end of my shower, I do a cold shower. Yes. I do EFT tap. Well, it's like instant lucidity, right? Like the warmth is great, and it's like, ooh, there's that feeling of home and being wrapped in a hug, and it's delicious. But then you put on that freezing cold water, and you're just, zoop, like, in motion.
Thank you. You have no idea how much grief I get about this.
Not for me. No, I experience the value of it. And so that is what compels me to continue doing it. It's highly beneficial. And we can look at the scientific health benefits of it. Just experiencing it and understanding and knowing what it does for me is enough for me to continue with it. I'm trying to think. Oh, what else do I do? EFT tapping sometimes, but I don't do it in the traditional way where I tap through challenges. I tap only. So it's like programming my avatar, and I feel it and hear it and experience it in that way. So I'll program my DNA, and I'll go deep, deep, deep into the conversation that I'm having with my being to program in that which I want to program in, or to reinforce and affirm. And that has proven to be incredibly powerful. Beyond any type of manifestation technique ever, is to simply code ourselves at the level of DNA.
So emotional freedom tapping.
Yeah, so I'll tap on those points, and then I'll speak.
Do that for everyone that may not be aware of that?
What was that?
Can you run us through that for those that aren't aware what that is or how to do it?
So the way that I experience it is it resets and it harmonizes all of my neurotransmitters, my neural pathways in my brain. So there are certain tapping points that you can tap on. And I'll start sometimes at the crown of my head, and I'll just go out and I follow what feels intuitive and natural. And you can come to the inner point of your eyes, out to your temples, under your eyes, right here, right here, and right here on your collarbone, or the main points under the arms as well. And that starts to harmonize all of your circuitry. And while I'm doing that, I'm speaking code essentially into myself, so that my neurotransmitters and my neural pathways begin to fire in that new direction. And that which is not in harmony with that can start to dissolve ultimately. Yeah, and when you do that at the level of DNA, it's a profound, I mean, you're emanating that then. As you go through life, you're emanating that into your hologram, into the world, and therefore receiving the echo of that. Yeah, receiving the echo of that in your experience reflected back to you from the outside world. So it's really beautiful too. And in that, I'm deeply embodied. So it's not just some disconnected affirmation that's coming from my mind. I'm speaking into myself like I would speak into a child or someone that I love and care for deeply, with the feeling of source through and through the mental space, through the heart, through my solar plexus, with my full emotion and tonality and resonance of love on board. So it's anchoring in at a core level, and then it's in a good way sticks.
It's amazing. Okay. What is your, you've gone through your movement exercises and kind of your attunement calibration exercises. Do you have any rituals or practices around food?
So I have my food set up in such a way that, like, I know what my body responds really well to. So I stay on that every day. And if something needs to shift, then I just tune in, and it's usually a micro shift, which is good too, because it'll trick my body and keep my metabolism and the energy flowing. But yeah, I do superfood smoothies all day until the evening, and I have one solid meal in the evening. I drink a lot of tea, organic herbal tea, tons of water, and a gallon to a gallon and a half of water every single day. Yeah, and everything's superfood, but everything's earth-based. Absolutely everything that I do is earth-based. There's one animal product that I have in my diet currently because I need it to stay grounded personally. That's the main reason why it's there. So I include eggs at dinner, but everything else is, yeah, superfood, smoothies, getting in greens, fruits, vegetables as much as I can, sticking close to the earth. And my body tends to love that and thrive on it and flourish on it. So. And raw cacao, of course, that's in there too. So I have my raw superfood cacao every day too. It actually has really potent activated superfood tonic concoction on top of it, like spread out over the actual cacao.
So that was going to be my next question of inquiry, which is, what are your thoughts around chocolate?
Oh my gosh. Essential. Essential. So when I tune into the energy of chocolate, and the way that I experience it is so something around the oxygen in the body, opening up the capillaries, expanding vision, allowing light to flow more freely, connecting into like supersonic frequencies, extrasensory perception. By supersonic, I mean really high, refined, subtle bands of frequency and genius and intelligence that are really only accessible at the subtle layers. So cacao is something that facilitates that access for me. Of course, like, it's a stimulant to my to my intellect, and also to my libido, which is great. Cacao, longevity. Yeah, those are the main ways. I mean, to me, it's it's almost, I haven't done ayahuasca yet. I would like to at some point journey with that medicine in a really sacred environment, preferably myself and one other person. But the energy of her, I know her very well, is present when I have a lot of cacao, and my channel is really clear. It's like that. It's like connecting into ayahuasca. It's those subtle frequencies, that connection, that extrasensory perception, seeing beyond the veil, and just being so aware and so attuned to your reality.
Yes. 100%. Man, we could do a whole long rant on that. I want to what do I want to do here? There's so much. Maybe just take a quick little pause. We have covered so much territory in total flow state, which I'm becoming aware of, like complete and utter flow state. I want to get your perspective, because we left off there, but I hadn't forgotten it, around synchronicity, particularly the principles or your perspective on architecting synchronicity into our life. And I want to caveat that with a thought, which is synchronicity a byproduct of being in tune with our destiny? And if we're not in tune with our destiny, are we going to experience the phenomenology of synchronicity as a repeated thing in our life?
Exquisite. Yes. It's embodying Dharma. It's embodying the cosmic field of Dharma itself, that light intelligence. And so typically the reason why we experience bouts of synchronicity is because we are embodying that. We are resonating at the frequency of our highest self, our genius. And then we kind of, got into patterns and programs that are not the truth, the core truth of who and what we are. And so that flow kind of, halted or got blocked up, or, all the ways that we can experience our disconnection from that flow that is natural and inherent to all of us and for all of us to experience. And so the more and more we allow that energy to course through us harmoniously, the more and more we experience that flow of synchronicity, but it's being in harmony with it from moment to moment to moment. So becoming a miracle generating machine, a manifester, a powerhouse manifester, is really about embodying the cosmic law of oneness, of abundance, of appreciation with intentionality in every single moment. Will just sync you right up with the flow. If there's one thing to master, it is that: appreciate life, which means add value to life, build life, grow life, flourish life. If we can do that in each moment, we'll always be connected in with that stream. And if we're not in certain moments, that's okay. We're all going through this together. We're all, releasing these old paradigms. It's okay. Just hop back on board the moment that you recognize you're not in that flow. So, so it's living that and embodying and exuding it deliberately, intentionally, and some level it's just about letting go and allowing it to flow through us. It's our natural state.
So the thought that I just had was the polarity of what I feel is the principle of the pain teacher and the principle of the synchronicity teacher. So the pain teacher is a feedback mechanism from our body or from life to alert us of a misalignment, right? So it's physical pain, like we've been working out too much, right? Okay, you have like an injury or incorrect movement pattern that you've repeated. Now you're wearing out part of your joints or something, or from an exercise or an athletic perspective, it's like, okay, you need to actually pull back and address the message that the pain is giving you: emotional pain, psychological, existential, etc. So the pain teacher is alerting us of something that's in the way, right? And then the synchronicity teacher is a feedback mechanism similar to the genius versus the mediocrity example. It's a similar kind of, and this is how I draw it up in my mind. The synchronicity teacher is a feedback that you're in the flow. So nothing is in the way. You're in the flow.
Well, and this is a great way to distinguish between cosmic law and ideology and all of this, because it will show you. Right. That's how to become aware of it. It's not like a personal ideology, or that it's you're living in the flow of it, and it is enlightening and illuminating you, and showing us all what it is to be in flow with that. And pain is our resistance to that flow. So, and here's the gift of it too, is that as we stay in that flow, every single thing gets accomplished. We embody all of the beautiful, multifaceted aspects of who and what we are as souls on this earth, like a kaleidoscope of these just gorgeous dramatic neon lights. We get to be all that we are, and we get to flow in between those dimensions of our embodiment throughout the day. And so then the game is really about learning how to balance on that ball, how to dance through life in joy with resilience, in our full power, coming fully alive, and
Right.
honoring all those spaces. So can I be so attuned to my own being that I know when it's time to dance and run and play and have fun, or get down to business and accomplish things and relax, meditate, create space? Am I attuned to all of that? And do I trust the flow of that, and knowing that in the flow of that, all that I desire to manifest will come to pass, and that flow is guiding me there. I just have to trust it and stay synced up with it, which creates a synchronicity.
Damn, that was so good. Synced up with it creates synchronicity. What a concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how are you with it?
This is what I love about the English language, is so many of like the fountain of youth. How do we access it? It's the fountain of youth, youthfulness, right. Having a youth.
It's not the kitchen sink filtration system of youth.
It's all just coded in for us to access. Reality is very literal in that way, and even the word reality has literal. I mean, everything
real
is a yes. It's a total precise feedback mechanism, and the way that we know if we're aligned to what we truly want, to the flow of source, to the flow of synchronicity, is we're experiencing what we truly want to be experiencing. It feels amazing. We're lit up, we're inspired, we're turned on, we're activated, we want to create, we want to play, we want to, all the things that we experience, we're embodied in that. And when we're not, it just shows us that we're not in total resonance with that, which just shows us that we're not, whatever we're experiencing, whether we're perpetuating a lifestyle habit or a thought pattern or whatever it is not in resonance with the highest possible timeline that is accessible to us.
Okay, we can't stop yet. So check it out. We need to talk about timelines. Now that's the natural progression of a conversation around synchronicity. It's not enough to just leave it there like, oh, it's great to experience synchronicities, but where the heck is it taking me? Like, what's the purpose? What is the trajectory, the destiny, right? Why are synchronicities happening anyways, right? Is it just like some built-in entertainment system in the reality matrix, or does it actually have a purpose involved with it?
Oh, man.
Let's when you and me talk about timelines, we've been talking about that frequently. Another conversation.
And that's how to choose your timeline frequently.
Right. So I think, okay, so let me just say this. Do you know Amareya Dreamseed? You know that name?
That sounds familiar, but I don't know her personally.
It's a him.
Oh, it's a him. So no.
He's a dear brother of mine, straight up mystic. Lived in Kauai, now lives in Bali. Mm-hmm. And we had an interview about 2 years ago in Kauai, and it's episode 103, I think, for everyone listening. And him and me just get into this whole thing about timelines, and I start going on this little riff about a piece of information called the Wing Makers, which I planted a seed with you. Excited to go into that deeper. And what I got from that material was this idea that the future on a multi-dimensional timeline, or infinite timelines, but multi-dimensional dimension, a different dimension, there's the future humans, future civilization. There's where humanity went on a potential timeline that exists simultaneously with this one and every other one. And there's this idea that I didn't come up with. It seems logical and obvious that our future self, or us in a future timeline, is communicating with us right here, right now. And is that what we call intuition? Is that what we call innate wisdom? Where the heck does this stuff come from? Is it coming from our past, or is it coming from our future? My opinion is that the mind is a repository for the past. So that's why the mind can't really deal with the uncertainty of the future, but the heart and the soul is in tune with the future and always trying to move through the booby traps that the prior version of ourself already went through. So that right there is a really interesting concept, and it's trying to get us on the right timeline, right?
Yes. Yeah. So good. I love how you just so eloquently and perfectly described that. And I mean, what we're talking about is what we would call God or source or our higher self or our genius. And that's why it's such an interesting thing, because, always say, thank you, source, thank you, God. And I just I feel it. And I'm so thankful. And I'll thank And I'm like, but I'm thanking all of energy and consciousness while I'm doing that. I'm thanking you. I'm thanking everything in my space. I'm thanking my body. I'm thanking life. I'm thanking we, because everything is that. That is it in its highest expression. So I'm looking at that dimension of us, which is you and me and the collective actualized on the highest possible timeline together, is the expression of that light, or what we would call source or God. And I'm speaking to that dimension of self. And I'm just like, thank you. Because there's moments when my sovereign self isn't choosing an alignment or isn't connected to that. And that's where, you have to have the wisdom to recognize when that's the case, and to enlist the support of that dimension of ourself that does know and can help us, hone in and line up and get back on track. But to still recognize it as part of ourselves and to not separate ourselves from it. And that is the majesty, the beauty, and the intense power that we have access to. And that is what we fear, because it is so big.
Yeah. Okay. That's a punctuation and a portal in of itself. Yeah. That brings up, for me, what that brings up is the willingness to adopt responsibility. This is a deep thing, right? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson, but he's a brilliant Canadian university psychologist, and so much of his work is drawing on theological and mythological archetypes and relating it to just the development of society, beings in society, and creating, like, what does it take to actually be a whole human. Right, mentally, emotionally, etc. And one of the things that he talks about, which I really resonate with, and I love how, like, straightforward he is. He's very articulate, but he's just like this is what I see going on, which is the adoption of responsibility, or the aversion to responsibility. And that right there is like a huge point in of itself. But I remember the Spider-Man movie. I don't remember if you remember the original one, where Peter Parker, before he becomes Spider-Man, his grandfather tells him, with great power comes with great responsibility. What I heard was, with responsibility comes great power.
That's so good. I love that. Yes. Cool. Because the moment that you decide to take it on, you start to have access to all of that power. I mean, the moment we decide anything, we start to line up with that evolutionary force that
boom.
With it. But I find that, so one, my perception of responsibility is probably a little bit different, because I look at it as, it is responsibility, but so it's a rewiring. It's shifting from a space of unconscious to conscious to super conscious, in which case it's no longer a responsibility. It's hardwired into.
Right.
So it's a natural, and we're experiencing it from a space of pure inspiration instead of responsibility. And then the joy in that is the competition that I have with myself. How much can I bring my own capacities forth through that which I am here to do, and how I am here to serve? So that's always the next level. So the next level of responsibility is the next level of capacity, is the next level of value creation, is the next level of service, is the next level of life enhancement for all. And so, to me, it's kind of like it's fun. It's a fun game. And how can I do all of that in a really potent, activated, loving, grounded, useful way? And so it's like an opportunity. It's a gift. It's this fun, like, game that I play with myself. It's like this, I don't even want to call it competition. It's more like, it has a sports feeling to it. Like me exploring my own capacity and being driven and motivated from that space of adding value to, because my soul won't let me rest unless I operate from that space. So, got to move into it. So if I can make it fun and inspiring and light, and just, it's hardwired in, it's something that I do every day, like taking a breath, then it doesn't have all the weight that word responsibility carries, the connotation that it carries with it. I don't have an issue with the word responsibility, but I'm feeling into the collective right now. And for a lot of people,
I think that's why there's the aversion, right?
Yeah.
So my feeling, not to cut you off, my feeling on responsibility is about being an asset, not a liability. And so that means being an asset to myself, being an asset to my my friends or my family or my partner or my purpose, my mission, my work, my community, my planet? Can I be more of an asset than I am a liability?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's just a cycling through the, can I be my true self more than I am my programs? Can I clear out those programs so that the truth of who I already am can emanate through? And that's the subtlety that I think is really important here to recognize too, is that we're not becoming excellent. We're claiming our excellence so that we can live into it more fully.
Right.
And that
Right.
naturally dissolves everything that we have told ourselves, that culture has told us, that we have carried in through, ancient lineages, encoded and scripted in our genetics. It helps to release all of that patterning, just to know and to affirm the truth of who and what we are. And then we live into that more and more. Those old programs start to dissolve and fade away until they are barely existent. I mean, I can't say that they're non-existent in my reality, but I can say that they are barely existent anymore, because I've just done so much work attuning to the source field. And I'm so thankful for that, because there's so much freedom. And then we're just living in a natural state. It's, the things we had to do to push to get there start to fall away. We don't have to do that anymore because it's organic and natural. But I have found in my own experience that there are times in our journey where, yes, we had to push. Yes, we had to do all of that to learn something, to gain some wisdom, even sometimes to have the realization that we didn't have to push. But most people experience that until we're solidly anchored into in the majority of our beingness, that truth, in which case, responsibility, creation, it just all becomes, it's just a natural inherent part. Yeah.
So I learned something last night that relates to everything that you're so eloquently articulating here, which is the whole thing around the caterpillar to the butterfly. And, I love the whole thing around the imaginal cells and the chrysalis and dissolving and being reborn. One thing I did not realize from a scientific perspective is that if you take the caterpillar in that morphogenic process, and if you assist it in the process of becoming a butterfly, the butterfly will die. It might get out, but it'll drop. And the explanation of that, which is is so obvious to me once I heard it, which is that it no longer has its drive to survive or to evolve, basically. It's like the reason why instinctually, people, like if you're a vegan or something, or if you're like in animal rights or that kind of thing, and you're disconnected from nature and you think that like nature is just this like innocent, pretty thing and animals are just hanging out like a Disney movie. It's like, it's a little bit different than that. There's this built-in survival transformational process. And so like for when a bird is born, like a chick is born, they'll get pushed off the edge or they'll get pushed out of the nest. So they have to fly by necessity. They can't be coddled. They can't be supported, or maybe like a little bit of support, but there's this kind of pushing out. Same thing with us as humans. Like if we become too codependent and we don't learn to be interdependent and we stay living with our parents or we stay on welfare, any of the things that our society has basically built a penthouse around us in the form of like our financial institutions, our hospitals, our politics, like every single thing, now that I think about it, in society is actually a way that we defer our own interdependence and become dependent on authorities to take care of things for us.
Yeah. And that just strips people. I mean, people are choosing it, but it would strip a being of their power, and they have no desire, no urge, no drive to discover their own capabilities and capacities to thrive and to create true fulfillment. Because in my experience, that's what fulfillment comes from, is knowing that I have the capacity and then putting it all into action. And then it's like, yes, I feel fulfilled because I literally am filled. I am filled with life, with expression, with
exhilaration.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh yeah. Just going into that energy doesn't even, because it just perpetuates that pattern where they then don't have to ever discover their own brilliance.
Bingo.
And why would they want to then if they didn't have any type of impetus, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So my feeling around all that is that with the absolute beautification of every single word that you've shared, like you're a master wordsmith and linguist and articulator, and with all of that, I want people to understand that there's a journey, there's a process, there is an endurance to spirituality, because true spirituality is really going into those dark crevices within ourselves and those ancestral wounds and the lineage and everything that's lurking in there. Just like Carl Jung said that your treasure will be found in the place you least want to look. And so like true spirituality is takes a certain type of grit.
Yes.
You know, a certain type of drive and focus and discipline and dedication that a lot of people in more of the new age-ish kind of all there is light thing. I'm just going to do yoga and drink juice and sing Kumbaya, and I'm just going to, everything in the world is just going to like kind of manifest or whatever. Or it's all good. Everything's paradise. We don't have to do anything. That whole thing, and that's a deference of responsibility, right? But I really resonate, and maybe it's just because I was raised as a warrior, literally, and that's just like built into me. Like if I'm not like accessing that grit and that like force of will, not all the time, but at least at some point in my, and I just, however I channel that, if I'm not experiencing that, I get actually not nervous or a little anxious. I get restless. I'm just like, the dragon in me is just like, man, I want to like put me on a basketball court or in a boxing ring or in the gym or something.
Yeah, that's why it's important to exercise our faculties
on
a daily basis to actually create that harmony, to create that balance from a space of action and fulfillment versus just trying to align with the field but not really do anything to create that harmony or to sustain that harmony.
Being lazy.
Because, oh man, I just have too much empathy for people because I've been through all the different dimensions of.
Yeah, I've experienced being lazy. It doesn't feel good. For me.
Do you think that it's lazy though, or do you think that that's a societal stigma?
Well, I mean,
or societal
semantics, I guess. I mean, I feel like, but I don't. Whenever I use these words, I'm not using it as an insult.
Yeah.
I don't mean to. It can come off like that because, I just kind of it can be a little sharp. But when I think of laziness, it's the same. It's this. All of this is wrapped up for me in the same polarity, conflict, which is like the same thing with the culture of death, the culture of life, mediocrity, genius, excellence. The opposite of that, maybe laziness, and for one word. And when I think of lazy, I think of a deferring of responsibility, a deferring of engagement, and it's actually it's passivity and apathy, right? Which is to me, when I think of love and the opposite of love, and I'm sure you definitely know this. I know we've all heard it. The opposite of love is not hate. Hate is closer to love than it. Hate is like hate and anger and all that kind of thing is an interesting emotion because you tend not to access that unless you're afraid or have lost something that you loved. Right. So that's actually, that's interesting. So to me, like the opposite of love is apathy. It's passivity. It's the unwillingness to engage with that which we love or to have the courage to love.
And so here's where my feminine comes in real strong though, so what will encourage that shift from apathy to action is love. So there has to be a certain level of
hey sometimes look, here's this is great because of our intrinsic masculine feminine qualities, get both sides of the coin here. Okay, so I'll just qualify that for me. So like coming from an athletic background, coming from that particular background, when I would train, like when I was being trained or when I trained teenagers, for example, and this may not be applicable in all situations, but I do think sometimes it's helpful to get a little bit of a smack, to just kind of like, it's like the cold shower. It's like, oh, okay, I'm here. I got it. I'm back. I fell asleep for a second, right? We don't know how far down our life could go if we don't pay attention to the details. So sometimes we need to get a little smack, sometimes with love, tough love, right? Like, like a great role model, a great mentor knows when to apply enough pressure and what points to push to get the student back on track, because they love them. They care more about them than they care about what they think of them in that moment, right? That's kind of part of that. That's not a thing I do all the time, but sometimes I have to do that with clients. If they're going the narrative and the story mode, it's like, I'm just okay. And then like, all right, we're back.
That's why I slap myself every day with my cold showers. And
it does it. The cold shower.
Because life has slapped me enough times that
right.
I've learned how to stay in steady motion.
Right. So you can apply that pressure on yourself, not the pressure, but you know what I mean? Like that you can apply that thing onto yourself, so you don't need life as a feedback mechanism to do it.
Right. And that's where happiness and fulfillment, and like for me, aliveness. I mean, I don't even feel a sense of power and aliveness. I mean, I told you the other day, my thing is power. Like I want to feel my power. I want to feel life force. I want to feel the creative pulse of the universe moving through me. And if I don't feel that, then it means I need to take more action. And that's for me personally. I'm not suggesting that for everyone, but I know that for me, that it means that I need to switch things up, or I need to take a new movement, or I need to expand my capacity, or I need to, something.
Yes.
Yeah, along those lines. It's usually not the opposite of that.
Well, as you're well aware, you and I are completely on the same page.
Well, I mean, hey, it's the spice and the exhilaration of life, and that's why you'll hear people who are peak performance coaches, athletes, all of this. They'll tell you, you've got to go to your next edge. You've got to go to your next edge. You've got to train to that next depth, to your next most expansive capacity. It becomes more and more and more. But the way that my approach is different from I would say those specific ideologies, although they're brilliant, is that is motivated from a space of push. Mine has been how to liberate and leverage the free energy of the universe.
Oh man, here we go.
Because that's what a pure flow state is. It's accessing that. It's opening our channel to be in sync with the flow of that. And that's why, even in flow state studies, they talk about the part of your brain where your self-consciousness flips off. You're no longer conscious. You move outside of yourself. You experience, as Stephen Kotler says, profound liberation from yourself.
Right.
So it's allowing genius, which is an intuitive, super conscious, creative intelligence, to inhabit us. But in order to do that, we've got to be in some kind of motion, some way that we're focusing on something, moving with something, dancing with something, engaging with something, to get in the habit of allowing that energy to come through and pour through, so that we can experience it more and more often. I'm certainly not thinking about a darn thing that I'm saying before I say it. I'm just flowing it. And so it's just accessing that energy, or creating a space to allow it to do what it does. And that's, when you're in a life or death situation, or you're doing higher performance sports where you've got to be like you're there. You're every single ounce of you is on board. And that's the power that we're accessing in those moments, is quantum cosmic power. It's no longer about just this. I mean, you're in sync. You're synced up with everything in your environment, everything around you, and that energy, that intelligence is guiding all of the information and data and consciousness in this vessel as to what to do to help you stay alive. So anyways, I'm all about accessing that flow, but not from a space of push, from a space of pure inspiration. So I look at it, instead of self-improvement, I look at it as self-creation, to make it fun and exciting. How can I
You're more accurate.
Well, yeah. It really, yeah.
what just popped up in my head was the difference between being effective and being efficient. And most people are trying to be efficient, but they're not being effective. And to me, the deeper subset of that is um, being doing good versus doing being right versus doing the right thing, something like that, right? Like so a lot of people are focused on being efficient, so statistics and numbers and quantification and all that, but that isn't necessarily effective from a quantum perspective, right? Because if you're only mathematically inclined, or let's say you're trying to this brings in this is kind of like this is a bit of a rabbit hole in of itself. It kind of brings in the morality thing around, am I going to do good at something, or am I going to do the right thing? Because they're not always the same thing. Right. And so I don't know exactly why that came up. I was thinking about it earlier, but I think it could circle back around, and I don't want to take too much time on this, but it could circle back around the inhibition to flow and the gateway to flow. Do you have any thoughts?
Question in there. I think that anything that is efficient is effective, and anything that is effective is efficient. And I think that those two things combined is what creates an exponential access to an exponential timeline, or quantum
instead
timeline.
Of incremental. Okay, so that's maybe a better way to say it, is that incremental versus exponential.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think both find their way into our.
That's a trap too, because like you need incremental momentum and everything that creates the exponential expansion, right?
Yeah, but if you're focused on an exponential universe, then the incremental steps fill in automatically. So it's also
okay. That's yeah.
But you're absolutely right, because on a very foundation, if I were to just look at the raw reality of what I was seeing, it would look like it was incremental,
right.
But it very well may not be if your consciousness and your point of focus is operating from an exponential reality. So so it just, so much of it has to do with perception. And in either case,
right.
I mean, we take linear steps and we take non-linear steps.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what I'm getting from that is it's about your intention, and it's about your belief. Like, how big are you willing to believe? How big can you ask for what you want? Like, there was a question that popped up in my mind that I shared with a friend when we were having a conversation, and these things just come to me, and I was like, what would the world be like if people acted as if they actually believed in God?
Or that they were God.
Well, see, that's the next level, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's that clear that anywhere there's a little wobble, that's exactly what I'm ironing out in my own self right now, is anywhere where there's a wobble, where I'm in any way in my mental space, identifying that as an energy or consciousness that is somehow separate from me or more powerful than me, but being it, allowing it, and expressing it in all moments from that point of awareness that I am it, but operating from the point of the I am will. So it's not an egoic, I am God. It's an I am an all-encompassing, loving, source, and I know this, and I'm embodying that, and I'm living through that.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And any moment, and from which case you become profoundly influential and over energy and consciousness, and you can rapid fire manifest anything you want, because you start to have sovereign free will choice, because you're operating from the highest dimensional timeline of choice freedom that is accessible. And if not a lot of people are doing that, because a lot of people are still remembering who they are, then you automatically have prime choice. Although everybody has that, because we are all that, and it's a completely transpersonal thing. It's just like, the person in the space that's choosing is going to have prime choice because they're choosing. So if you know yourself as that and embody yourself as that, and you're playing from that playing field, then it gets real fun because you start to really get to orchestrate in the larger creative landscape. And that's where it gets supernatural and exponential to the umpteenth, And it's a lot of fun, and we all have access to that capacity to just live from pure choice in each moment. Choice of the I am will is what my mentor and friend Jared Hewitt calls it, who I love dearly, and just phenomenal energy worker who literally in certain moments saved my life, helped me to feel source when I was going through very traumatic experiences, to feel that frequency of home. He's masterful at expressing the tonality of source of home. So if you're listening and you love energy work, check out Jared Hewitt. Yeah.
Wow. This has been absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing. Whew. And you take it just a pause, just like we were literally in a 2-hour flow of hyper synchronicity. Really excited for everybody on the other end of this.
I'm absolutely honored to just, well, one, be sharing space with you, and to have this beautiful seamless flow moving through us and out into the world to support every single sacred being who's tuned in the places and spaces where they most need support, just getting the gems and the jewels that they need, and appreciative that we could all be here doing this together.
Well, Solara Sophia Rose, it's been an honor and pleasure having you in this conversation, having you on the show, sharing you with this incredible, eclectic, diverse audience. And so I'd love for you maybe to summarize our conversation just in a moment for everyone, just to kind of like, synthesize the quintessential point that you want to drive to people. And then I want them to get access to your work, your information, you to whatever degree that they can. So AKA your websites and all that kind of stuff. Hand it over.
Awesome. Thank you. So first of all, we'll get the logistical things out of the way. So my website is solararose.com, and you can visit me at Solara Sophia Rose on Facebook, my personal page and my business page, and Solara Rose on Instagram. So those are the main access points. And to synthesize everything, we're just going to go and we're going to flow. So staying open, keeping your heart open to trust, to love, to source, allowing the quintessential intelligence, creative life force, and genius of the universe to flow through you, creating spaces to allow yourself to receive that, because everything starts from a point of reception. We are essentially these powerhouse magnets, and to really truly live and experience life at full capacity, you have to allow that energy in, and then we give it out, and it just creates this profoundly gorgeous feedback loop of abundance. So living in line with the flow of abundance that you naturally inherently are, relating to yourself in that way, seeing yourself in that way, doing all that you can to connect into the frequencies of home, of flourishing, of paradise, of abundance, and to remember to reinforce those truths, that truth of love within yourself, and to do the best that you can to live it through, and to always be empathetic and compassionate with yourself and others, because we're all releasing all of the programs that don't tell us that that is the truth of who and what we are, while anchoring in that resonance of home, of pure source, to believe in yourself, to have faith that you can create absolutely any single thing that you want to in this life, and to continue to expand into your dreams, and know that you have the power, the capacity, and the potential to live all of that out in this lifetime. Surround yourself by loving, supportive, uplifting, encouraging people. Love yourself, value yourself above all else. Choose that which values you, and release everything that does not. What else? Where do we want to go with this? Yeah, your infinite creative intelligence emerging. Have fun. Enjoy the ride. Create.
I definitely have been enjoying this ride. Thank you. Yeah, multiple levels. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to join me and do this incredible, legendary, epic conversation. This was special. This was really, really special. So very grateful for you.
I'm so thankful for you. Mm-hmm.
To be continued.
Mm-hmm.